Welcome to the Private Equity Experience Podcast, your backstage pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets that drive value in the PE universe. No filters, no fluff, just straight talk and expert insights to help you navigate the private equity world with confidence. And now your hosts, Ed Barton, Rory Liebhart, and Emily Sander.
Quick stat, 70% of PE firms with less than $1 billion of assets under management employ operating partners. So we've talked about a whole bunch of, Ed is so surprised. We've talked about a lot of partners on this podcast, so deal partners and financial partners. Opening question for you two. If private equity is a band, what instrument does the operating partner play?
What a question that is.
That's where the hell did you come up with that?
I'm going to say rhythm guitarist, I think.
Okay.
I was either going to say rhythm guitars or vocals, because really they're the ones that the operating partner is going to be more the one that, well, I don't know. It really depends on the role of the operating partner. So it could be anywhere from
it depends.
it could be anywhere from vocals to the bass.
Yeah.
Or to the drum.
Yeah.
Because they're driving the beat, or they could be, depending on their role, could be parachuted in and they're driving the entire band.
Yeah. Well,
at least on
the
that
punchline here is it's a hell of a gig to get, whether you're in a band or working for PE as an operating partner. Yeah. Great gig to get for sure. So
all right.
We'll talk all about it here.
A whole bunch of PE firms are using operating partners. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of operating partners. It is a entry into this for our listeners. They're kind of like consultants that you would bring on. They're people you would deploy for pieces of the operation of your business.
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above. So a typical operating partner scenario, where the commonality is the operating partner's expertise is in the day-to-day tactical operation of a business. Yeah. So where your PE, we've talked a lot about how the PE team is formed and structured and how the deal team looks. Those guys, that is their expertise, is how do I financially structure a deal? How do I financially structure a business? How do I kind of get the deal to close and negotiated? And then on the other side, the sell side, how do I get this company sold and positioned? The operating partner is the one that kind of sits in there and goes, okay, let me make sure that this thing is operating the way it's supposed to. And so their expertise is the tactical operation of a business, and they could serve in any type of role and again, I've kind of been in a bunch of these types of roles. This has been my jam. Is I could be sitting at the fund level assisting the operating businesses. And so it could be, I was, maybe a shadow CFO. And so there was a CFO at the business and I was consulting to them to help them get
so ominous, a shadow CSO. CFO.
Yeah.
Or it could be you're an operating partner and you're consulting with a group of CEOs, CFOs, whatever, on operational components. And we had that at Primus. They had an operating partner who really assisted all of us, like at the CXO level, to kind of pull things together, best practice sharing, those kind of things. Or it could be you're an operating partner and we need you in this particular investment because we're short a CXO. And therefore you go in there and you're the CFO, the COO, the CRO, the CEO, whatever. And
he usually has a bench of those folks they can pull from.
The difference is the operating partner is going to be sitting, they're basically, as opposed to being like, they're in the Rolodex. And so you've got the Rolodex, you go, hey, I need a CFO. Okay, I'm going to go call Rory because Rory's been a CFO of one of my portfolio companies in the past and we successfully exited. An operating partner is normally on the bench in the private equity firm. So they're on payroll. They're part of the private equity firm, but their expertise is in one of those operational elements or tactical elements, and they're deployed by the private equity firm kind of on a routine basis either. And again, their expertise is a tactical. So where it's not like, okay, there's a Rolodex of these folks. They have those. operating partners are there day in, day out. They may even be part of the diligence process
Definitely.
and the operationalization of that strategy, that
They're
investment.
like they're entrenched
Yes,
in the
at
business.
the
Well, a
at the PE
couple,
at the PE fund,
yeah. A
at
couple
the
things are
general.
generally true for operating partners. One, they're not schlubs. These are generally highly successful people that have had multiple exits. In a lot of ways, it's almost like a second career for folks. At least a lot of them that I've dealt with, they've run businesses and sold them, and they've moved from being on the operating company side to the PE side. But because of the success they've had as operators, this is where it kind of segues into the PE strategy. Is each PE has its own niche. It has its own kind of sectors that it focuses on and things like that. And so a lot of times operating partners are the folks that have been really successful in that particular industry segment, in that particular operating business kind of template. And so, a PE company and a PE group is an investment company. They're investment professionals. So you match that with the power of a strong operator. That's a really, really impressive thing. I read a stat recently. I don't know. It's a McKinsey stat. It's something like 3 to 5% IRR lift on investments that PEs make when they employ operating
A
partners.
strong
And these are
operating partner.
generally
Wow.
people that aren't just like making a meager salary. These are, they're operating partners implied in the name. They're part of the GP. They're part of the PE group. They just are a different functional role than somebody that's an investment professional per se. So it's super, super important and really can be a major asset to a PE group and to an operating company. A lot of times they bridge the gap between, a management that's now owned by PE and the PE group and vice versa. As Ed said, assisting with the diligence, but also helping founders hire the right CEO for the operating business, whatever it could be. It's just another way of saying we've got a lot of firepower on the bench in terms of brains and experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my closest experience is seeing chiefs of staff be
Yeah.
deployed as operating partners. And
Yep.
I like the word that you used, they're not schlubs. They're not
Yes.
schlubs.
That's a
It's
technical term.
basically like this
Yeah.
I've seen chiefs of staff be deployed and they're like this force multiplier where
Yep.
they add this layer where they lift the leadership team exponentially. So leadership team
Totally.
been going along, making progress, incremental progress, steady progress, and then you just like
Mhm.
exponentially multiply it. And I think those are some of the game changers that you could have as operating partners when it goes well.
Yeah. No question about it. And a lot of times the genesis of the relationships start when maybe the PE group acquires a company. Maybe that operating partner at the time is an executive with that operating company. They're successful. They sell that business. Operating partner, maybe looking for the next thing, and they're like, "Hey, well, let me hop on the other side of the fence and work from the PE side and really, as you say, like help them grow their investment portfolio in the right way." And kind of that's where the expertise around like being able to spot, and with Ed's point, you have the Rolodex and the connections in the industry to find roll up opportunities, which we talked about in the last podcast. There's a whole litany of reasons why having a CEO type of person on the roster at a PE group is super valuable, just as valuable as it is to have them run the operating company in some cases.
What are some other examples just for folks to get their head around? So we've mentioned chief of staff. We've mentioned, if you're in an industry and someone's run the playbook at an operational level before, maybe if they're trying to build a new channel and it's like,
Mhm.
hey, you were at this type of company before and built this new channel for them. Here's a similar company. Can you do it again? Is it cutting costs? You're really good at that. What types of things are they brought in for?
The one I've seen,
Yeah.
there's two roles I've seen that are common outside of the CEO. So you've got someone who's been a successful CEO, and like Rory said, they're brought in to really mentor the founder or the new
Mhm.
private equity kind of enmeshed CEO on how to transition most effectively into that fund environment. But the other two roles that I've tended to see heavily populated on the the operating partner side have been chief financial officers and chief technologists.
Yes.
And again, a lot of the challenges that when you think about a private equity investment, a lot of times they're looking for increased multiple. They're looking for, how do I get this business to scale? How do I get leverage into it? And one of the key components to that is how do they utilize their technology and how do they integrate that technology into the operations? And how do you think about technology as a strategic force and a scalable one and a replicatable one rather than just we do technology or we're a technology company. And those technologists that are business oriented are tough to find. That's a tough road. You don't bring technologists who don't know technology, or you've got technologists who don't know business. And where I've seen the operating partners, where private equity's brought in operating partners, are the technologists that really are skilled at bridging both. Business.
We had one. We had
did.
one.
And I will tell you that
I've seen a couple
get calls routinely from our old PE firm. Are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? Are you ready yet?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned due diligence. So the person Ed and I are referring to was our COO and CTO. He held both roles at various points in the company, and he was so good at bridging the technology and the business. And he was just he was just normal, cool dude you could hang out with, and he could explain things to you. And he would help with due diligence for other potential investments because they trusted him so much and they knew his work product and his talent and skill.
A lot of times these operating partners, depending on the functional role, like a CFO or a CTO, as I was talking about, those are almost like a shared service in a way from the PE group to the portfolio of operating companies. And one of the things that is always talked about is you try to create synergies and consistency across operating portfolio if you're looking to kind of have them represent a strategy that's kind of uniform. Another way of saying that is they're the connective tissue in some ways to make sure that, hey, if we're going to buy software for these companies, it's going to be consistent. It's going to be plug and play. It's not going to be a mismatch or whatever architecture. If maybe we have a unified vision of moving to the cloud, whatever that may be. And the same thing goes for the CFO role. I look at that similarly as, a good CFO can probably come in and be effective for any type of company at that point, and so what they do is kind of help the operating companies meet the demands of of the PE fund as an ownership group, because ultimately they do work for the PE fund, but they're really that, connective tissue between management and PE in a lot of ways. And then ultimately, they sit on the board of these operating companies too. So yes, they're a part of the PE group, but as we've talked about in our book and we've talked about on this podcast a couple of times, you've got other folks at the table, the board table, so to speak, beyond just the management. You have the reps from the PE group, and a lot of times the operating partners are those folks that are, sitting around the table helping you think through the problems you have. And one of the things again that is attractive to PE groups for bringing in operating partners is they come with generally a playbook. They've been there, done that, and all businesses are unique, but most people at a certain point in their career, if they've been successful running businesses, have kind of seen it all. And so if it's matched up with the right strategy that the PE group is making investments in, then they can just come in and say, here's how we get it done, folks. We're going to strip this out. We're going to roll this up. We're going to tuck this in, and then we're going to synergize, and we're going to flip. We're going to X multiply. And it sounds really cool, but people are highly effective at that, and they just rinse and repeat, and they make a lot of money for a lot of people, including themselves.
And I mean, you both have specialized at some point in your career in turnarounds. Is that hey, I have an operating partner who knows the playbook for turning around this type of business or this type of distressed business?
And a turnaround approach, it is a skill set that's different from a growth oriented. Like, I am not a growth guy. I am more of a turnaround guy. Growth is not my expertise. And I tend to be able to go, okay, I can get you stable. I'll get you to kind of a point where you can start to grow. And then you need to find someone else, because I panic when I start spending money on marketing and stuff. That's just, I get,
You and I share that trait. Oh my God. I don't know what
But-
it is about marketing, but that's the one that just gives me the most freaking angst.
no, yeah,
freaking
no,
time.
I don't see the ROI.
I just
in
see
it, but-
like ROI negative on everything.
Yep.
I'm like,
But the skill set, so like when you said turnaround, a lot of times turnaround is like, from my seat, I've been called on to turn around everything from financial services companies to tech companies to, it doesn't,
yeah,
the playbook is largely the same there. You have to learn the business, but the playbook on a turnaround is similar. Then on the growth side, it's a little bit different animal. That tends to be a lot more industry specific because you really need to leverage your expertise of the market, your expertise of your competitors, and those elements. So it's easier for me to get a company to a positive net operating income than it is for me to get from that positive net operating income to a 30% growth rate. And other folks who are in that industry have problems going, how do I get to a zero, to a zero at the bottom of the financial statement or positive? But once you're there and they've got resources, they can grow that thing at a 20% compounded annual growth rate.
right. Just made me think about something there. I think turnaround CEOs, I think CFOs can often be great turnaround CEOs based on the quality that they bring to the table, right? It's a lot of rationalization. It's a lot of undoing wrongs and things like that to getting it to a point of, being primed for growth again. And so, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know.
And you had mentioned board members or board seats earlier, and I remember you guys have probably had some too, but independent directors. So folks who
We've
are
seen
like,
them all.
yeah, but I've had some phenomenal independent directors who were just like grounded, good people, wanted to help out. They were certainly like part of the board and kind of, tucked in with the PE firm, but they came on site, they tried to help, they connected with folks who could help us with stuff, and they were some of the best resources we
That's
had.
good.
So
You've seen some good ones then.
yeah.
I would say I've never seen some mind-blowingly good ones. I've seen some neutral and decent, but I've never seen some game changers. But I know they're out there, absolutely out there. But that's where it comes into like what's sometimes the criticism of these operating partners. Maybe they become too meddlesome on the board for the purposes of what that particular operating company is trying to achieve, and maybe they become more of a distraction or kind of chase things down based on their own perceived playbook that just isn't the right playbook for that company.
Yeah.
Maybe they thought it was, but it's not, So
Where do you
I've certainly seen that.
Where do you come down on that like outsider piece? Because I was just talking to like a chief communications officer, and he does
Use wisely.
these like workshops where they need someone from the outside to come in and like facilitate this discussion. And then I have other cases where it's like, we don't want an outsider consultant coming in and telling us how to do our thing, So I'm wondering like where you guys.
Well, I think that the board construction chapter in our book is one of the more insightful ones. And I think we could do a whole pod and should on, board dynamics. But, each company, again, I'll say it again, is unique. It has its own dynamics, its culture, its challenges. So when you bring in an external board person, what is it you're trying to solve for? Are you trying to babysit the CEO? Or are you trying to, implement a product strategy, implement a go-to-market? I mean, there's a whole litany of things that you could be trying to achieve. So it's really matching what you really need to the, individuals that can actually help push that forward rather than just literally take up a board seat and, add no value in a quarterly board meeting that lasts 6 hours, like I've seen that a lot. But, I know that there's folks out there that have made businesses way better on behalf of ownership by what they bring to the table. And what does that really mean? If you really break it down, it means, are you willing to put in some work to help this company succeed? Which means opening up your Rolodex, forging connections, drawing back on the things that made you successful, bringing them to the bear here, coaching and mentoring in a authentic way, being, a true liaison between management and PE. There's a whole thing that can actually happen, but then there's stuff that theoretically should happen, but doesn't, which is, adding value. So, and a lot of, these people, the company is paying these folks, right? There's oftentimes compensation attached to those roles, not just paid by the PE group to that group, but like also paid by the company to a board, cash comp, equity, all that stuff. So, there's only a limited amount of that resource to give away. Make sure you're giving it away to the right person or people.
Do operating partners always have a board seat, or you can be, I know you can be an independent director by themselves, you can be an operating partner, or you could be both. There's just different combinations.
Yeah, I'd say nothing's absolute. I'd say, a lot of times you have a board seat taken up by one of the, managing directors on the deal from P group, and then maybe an independent director that may or may not be an operating partner in the PE group, might just be an independent that's not affiliated, but it also could be an operating partner that's part of that group. I know a lot of folks at PE groups that are sitting on boards that are operating partners, for example.
Yeah, your operating partner from the PE group is not an independent director in any sense.
Right.
They're going to be a board member as a representative of the private equity team.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was funny what Rory had mentioned about, independent directors, and you guys were talking. I was kind of thinking back to the first private equity backed company that I was with. Rory is where we hired Rory to do bank recs. Yeah.
I miss those days sometimes, honestly.
We actually had an incredibly high powered set of board members. Like we had board members that were like former chairman of Goldman Sachs, and we had board member who was on the Federal Reserve, and it was like, these were some powerful dudes.
Yeah.
And the CEO was tough to work for, but you got to give him credit on that. He had a board that had some really both local powerhouses like Herman Sarkowski, and then some national powerhouses on that board that were just holy cow. You get on a board call and you listen to what these guys had to say.
Mm-hmm.
If someone
that you just hit on something though, Ed, and sorry to interrupt you there, Emily. Like, engagement is so important in these things. It's one thing to assemble the roster of all-stars on the board, but it's another thing to get the actual engagement from the board in that business, because these are folks typically. We're now moving more towards board, but this may not be the only thing they have going either. So it's getting the engagement level at the level that you want to see it can sometimes in its own right be a challenge.
And that's actually where the operating partner is of benefit, because they are paid to be focused on that portfolio of companies, where your outside board members or independent board members may or may not be getting paid cash. They normally will have some skin in the game. And you may or may not, if they don't feel like it's worth their time, or that, the return is going to be worth the investment in time or money, you will not, when you've got and we had, for instance, Chris Flowers, who was with Goldman, powerful dude on our board. When you have a Chris Flowers and he's like, this is a waste of my time, you're not going to get engagement. He's got banks to buy. He ain't gonna worry about his little investment in this small company in Seattle.
Yeah.
And but when there is something to do, he would engage. And so that was, or when he felt like there was something worthwhile. So I think that's where the operating partner is a real advantage for the private equity team, is you get in theory, you get the expertise of that independent board member, but you also get their focus, where an independent board member, outside board member, you may or may not get that focus. Mm-hmm. That is really going to help the management team.
Yeah.
And you said companies, plural, in what you just said there. So just to clarify, can operating partner, are they typically with one company, or are they working
typically they're actually a cross portfolio, and it's going to be circumstances that will cause them to become embedded in a company.
Right. I.e., we're sacking the CEO and you need to come in and actually play that role again. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's that. But I think that's part of the point, Emily, is, these folks, especially if you have somewhat of a unified, roadmap with the the portfolio companies that the PE group owns, like you want that kind of consistency across those businesses. And they, like, as I said, they're kind of that connective tissue. It can kind of steer things a little bit. And they're usually pretty influential individuals and can actually make things happen.
Well, you gave that example where I think one or both of you have been CFO for all of the portcos in a fund.
I think Ed has done a little bit more globetrotting than me. I've done that. My journey, I guess, is like I've been within the same family of companies, but I've both had CFO and president roles. So I've jumped around, but yeah, into different roles. But the point is, yeah, like, typically there's a desire to have unification across businesses within the umbrella of the PE group or ownership group for that matter. Because I've done that also for, let's call it corporate owner group, where we are basically operating subsidiaries, but different businesses, but trying to march to the same sheet of music within the same, industry vertical in the company. So
yeah, and in my case, they would have operating partners, of which I kind of served in the CFO type role for the fund. So each fund, so I was like in fund 5. Fund 5 had a set of shadows. Fund 6 had a separate set of shadows, and Fund 7 had a separate set of shadows that they plucked out either off the, kind of brought in or plucked off their Rolodexes. And that, because the concern there, and this goes back to kind of how private equity is structured, is the fund is basically paying our salary at that point. So now the private equity GP isn't paying the salary. The fund companies are paying our salaries. And what they didn't want to do is go, well, this fund and this fund, so fund 5 and fund 6 in my case, had different LP structure. So different LP ownership. And so they're like, look, we can kind of charge off to these companies in kind of proportional amount. It's the same investors. Over here, it's a different set of investors, or at least different percentages. And so we can't have them cross over. So they actually really, now these funds were in the big, like 10 figures. So it was not, or almost 11. So it was not like we were small, tiny little funds. These were big funds.
No.
And we were, but they would firewall us off. But I had a portfolio of companies to look at that included specialty finance, restaurants, mortgage companies, REO company. It was a bunch of different stuff in there that we had to over.
That was your own form of performance punishment, I think.
That was
you're just bumping along, running a business, and you're like, oh, sorry, buddy, you're plucked out. You're gonna have to untangle us from a web of shit, basically, which you did. So, selling airplanes and down bankruptcy packaging and good times.
If operating partners are kind of a second stage career or even third stage career type of move, if someone's listening, is like, you know what, I could be moving into that. I have the background for that. How do you become an operating partner?
You really better have. I was about to say, you better have gotten what you're either coming out of a publicly traded company or a high profile unicorn type private company. Or you've got a really strong relationship with the private equity firm. And there's an expectation, and Rory kind of hit on it. There's an expectation with the operating partners that you're going to be investing as the general partner does. So it's not just you're also going to write a check for the privilege, and you're going to be co-investing alongside the GP.
Got skin in the game.
You're co-investing alongside the LPs in many cases in that portfolio. So that's part of your win is you participate in the GP return. Yep. Part of your risk is you generally write a check for the privilege. And so, you may get hired as an operating partner with a salary of $300,000 a year. You're going to be expected to write a check for a minimum of $1 million into the GP and to become a partner. And you've got the upside of a certain percentage of the GP's portfolio.
Yeah.
And you're working your butt off.
You're normally working. I wouldn't say they're working as hard generally as the the operators are.
Right.
You are definitely not retired,
Yeah.
and you're paying for the privilege. Now, again, as Rory noted, you will do if you're with a good private equity firm and they've got a good set of investment theses, and you are doing your job well. It's an incredibly lucrative business, and you are not working 100 hours a week or 75 hours a week. You're normally at a 40 to 50 hour a week job. You're more in a consulting type role, unless you get parachuted in which case then you've got a shit show on your hands, and you're really going to be kind of
Yeah.
So you just
rolled
have
up
that
and
option looming
Yeah.
over you at any time.
Yeah.
That-
Well,
Prepared.
then it's like you'd be hard pressed to say
always
no
there.
because your investment capital is at risk on that deal,
right.
So, but yeah, it is one of those things that seems to me like one of the roles in life that's more of a meritocracy, because like I said, you don't just like apply for that on like Indeed, like you're recruited heavily based on your levels of success that you've had.
Who's on that interview loop? Are the LPs interviewing operating partners? How does that work?
It's a good question.
I've never seen an LP as part of that process. Part of that is because they are limited partners, and so that's not their role. It generally is
Partners in the PE group, the GP.
Yeah, the managing directors and the senior managing partner at the PE is generally going to be your decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think this trend is going to increase, stay about the same as what it is now, or decrease?
Well, I've certainly seen it increase significantly from 20 years ago when I was first in 25 years ago when I was first in private equity world. The operating partner concept was not as common. I mean, like I said, I was at a 9-figure, 10-figure fund, and we had operating partners, but that was not, that when we were acquired, before that, we had been acquired by a smaller private equity firm, no operating partners. Now, I mean, the last PE firm we came out of them, they had operating partners, and they're relatively small in comparison.
Yeah.
And so, I think they recognize, and Rory had kind of cited the McKinsey study where there's a tangible ROI to having a good, solid operating partner or operating partner strategy. And so these guys don't leave money on the table. That's not their normal MO. So when they see that that's, something that can increase at a relatively low risk, increase their return, that brings the risk premium down on that investment and allows it to kind of accelerate the growth, you're going to do that.
Yeah. I do think that maybe the dynamic could change is the type of personnel. Like, so I feel personally like we're in the midst of a really rapidly changing technology landscape. I mean, faster than maybe we've even been used to in recent times. And you're going to start to see many more CTO or just more like even chief architect types, sitting as operating partners in PE, folks that really understand how to make AI utilized in everyday business, whatever, however you want to put it. I'm not a technologist, so I'm probably not saying it the right way. All I'm saying is where you might have seen CEOs and CFOs and so forth on is the primary types of operating partners. Now it's going to be much more technology product people to help their operating companies take advantage of the zeitgeist of AI, which we find ourselves in. If you can somehow attach .ai to the domain that you're on, like somehow that increases enterprise value. So, I mean, I just think there's something to that. And so, it'll continue to evolve as these things do, but certainly a lot more technology orientation, I think, product as well.
All right. So a little bit of info on operating partners and probably a potential future pod on board dynamics, because that was interesting.
Oh boy.
That might be a multi-part series.
That'll be a greatest hits episode for us.
We will close it out here. We need like a catchphrase as we outro. What should our outro phase be? Just like, I don't want to just like scream PEX, because that could be PEX.
Hashtag PEX.
That could be taken out of context.
I
think about it. If listener, if you have a suggestion, drop it in the comments. Let us know.
That would be awesome.
These bad boys out. Otherwise, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Rory.
Thank you. Enjoy your alpha.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.